Alrighty, everyone. I am here with Robert P. George. We initially scheduled this interview to talk about his book, Seeking Truth and Speaking Truth, which I have right here. And we will talk about it in a little while, but today is Wednesday, September 10th. And right as we are starting to record this, and just got news on my phone that Charlie Kirk has died, and he was shot in Utah at a university event for Turning Point. And so we thought it'd be best to just start this podcast and interview by talking about that. And it obviously goes with your book and what you talk about in your book in a lot of ways. But I guess just tell me, you mentioned before we started recording that you had met Charlie Kirk. I guess just, give me your initial thoughts and reactions.
Well, I'm horrified. Mm-hmm. I'd be horrified at any shooting like this. But I'm especially horrified because I did know Charlie. We were not close friends. We met 3 or 4 years ago. We had lunch together. We had a very good conversation about the situation with higher education and the value of getting an undergraduate degree. Then just about 2 months ago, my dear friend Cornell West and I were guests on Charlie's show to talk about the book the two of us have out together called Truth Matters. The subtitle of that book, it's ironic, is Fruitful Disagreement in an Age of Division.
Right.
Much of the point of that book is to say, look, folks, we got to talk to each other. Mm-hmm. We can't treat each other as enemies to be destroyed. We have to treat each other as friends who disagree, as Cornell and I do, but we're beloved friends. And Charlie had us on his show to talk about that, and he treated both of us, me, who's on the conservative side, Cornell, who's on the left side, with grace, with respect, with kindness, certainly with dignity. Charlie was a person who, it has to be said, well, as a person of strong convictions, as I am, and as I know you are, and as Cornell is, still he was someone who was always willing to engage people who disagreed with him in a constructive conversation. He may well have been doing that, for all I know, when he was shot out in Utah. It was much of what he did, actually, professionally and politically. So I'm horrified by this. Of course, I feel awful for his wife and 2 small children left without a husband, without a father. This is a nightmare. And I'm assuming, we don't know the facts yet, but it's hard to avoid the suspicion that Charlie was murdered by somebody who didn't like his opinions.
Right.
And what kind of country do we live in where people kill each other because we don't like each other's opinions? Mm-hmm. So it's a horror. I just hope that people across the different traditions of faith and of every shade of belief will join in prayer for the repose of Charlie's soul, for his wife and family and his other loved ones. And I hope this does not lead to any kind of retaliation of any sort. This worries me. But I hope it will be a moment when we can all reflect on the need to restore civil discourse and civic friendship to our poor, beaten, beleaguered country.
Yeah. It's sad. I mean, the whole thing is absolutely sad and horrible. I mean, it feels like, I live in Wisconsin, obviously never met Charlie Kirk, but I'm 26. So I grew up in the generation that really, in some ways, grew up with Charlie Kirk. I've seen him from his beginning, and I've always had a lot of respect for him. Didn't always agree with everything that he said, but he would speak the truth. And there's always a cost for speaking the truth, no matter what age you live in, no matter what country you're in. There's always a cost, whether that's, just losing friends and relationships, or in his case now the cost is his own life. But I think he was always a guy that I deeply admired and respected. I was like, I want to be more like Charlie Kirk, because he'll talk to people that he disagrees with. He's not rude about it. He's not not angry. Sometimes he'll get a little feisty, but that's just all in good faith. And
he was a person of passionate conviction, but there's nothing wrong with that as long as you're willing to listen to the reasons people adduce, the arguments people on the other side give, the evidence people on the other side are prepared to give
Yes,
for why you're wrong about something. And he
absolutely.
was exemplary in that. He was willing to engage people who very dramatically and just as passionately as he did believed differently from him.
Yeah. Oh man, it's hard to like think about anything. I mean, it just seems like a massive cultural moment, turning
Well,
point.
maybe this is a moment when we shouldn't be thinking about other
Yeah,
things.
it's true.
Maybe this is a moment for reflection, first of all, on the life and now death of this young man. A moment for thinking about what the consequences are, the real personal human consequences of that. For a woman who was left without a husband, bringing up two small children who were left without a father. Think about his grieving parents. Charlie was a young man. I suspect his parents are alive. Perhaps his grandparents are alive.
Yeah.
They're profound human costs. This is profoundly humanly painful for the people who knew and loved Charlie. And of course, not just the people who were personally close to him, but a lot of the people who looked up to him, who he influenced, a lot of young people. And of course, there were a lot of people who despised him.
Yeah.
But I hope that they'll pause for a moment and lay aside that those political and ideological differences and just reflect that here was a guy who was, in the arena, bringing his arguments to the public square, engaging with people who disagreed with him, who was not shooting at other people, not trying to destroy his political enemies. He was trying to convince them. He was trying to win them over with arguments and reasons.
And he did.
Evidence.
He won a lot of them. I mean, he won a lot of people over.
Yeah.
A lot of young people were convinced of the conservative way of life and position and philosophy through listening to Charlie Kirk, guys like Charlie Kirk. So he totally had massive influence.
So here's the worry coming out of that, actually. Yes. Will there be a lot of young people who are influenced by Charlie or who have views similar to Charlie's who say, you know what? Words, arguments, and civil discourse just doesn't work. Doesn't work. We need more effective methods. And of course, more effective methods means methods other than persuasion, force, coercion, in the worst cases, violence.
Right.
I really pray that this will end now, that there will not be people who feel they have to avenge Charlie's death for ideological reasons. I pray that there will not be retaliation. Let it end right now. I know Charlie would not want there to be retaliation and revenge. So let's vow right now, those of us on the conservative side, we don't need revenge. We don't need anybody to be shot on the left side because Charlie on the right side was killed. Now, we don't even know if it was somebody on the left who killed him. It could be some mentally ill person. It could be some nut. It could be, anything. But even if it turns out to have been politically motivated, it's got to stop here. We can't have another tit for tat retaliation.
Well, I think what you're talking about, I mean, this is where dialogue and discourse is going to come into play, because your book, Seeking Truth and Speaking Truth, it says law and morality in our cultural moment. And I just want to, in light of what we were just talking about with Charlie Kirk and free speech and dialogue and engaging in dialogue and not letting things move into violence, I think maybe stepping back and asking the question of what actually is the current cultural moment that we're in? Like, what is it? Like, what is this current cultural moment? Because it feels like I'm young. I haven't lived through all of the things that my grandfather lived through, the end of World War II and assassination attempts on the Kennedys. And I mean, people have lived through a lot of different crazy things in the United States over the past century. And but it does feel like to me over the past 5 to 10 years, something really dark and really weird has happened in the United States. And we've seen multiple assassination attempts on Trump. Now the murder of Charlie Kirk. There's been civil unrest with the BLM riots in 2020. I mean, the COVID lockdowns and all of that stuff. There's just been so much crazy stuff that's happened in the current cultural moment. But my question for you would just be like, what exactly is this? What's going on? Give me wisdom from somebody who has lived longer than me, because it feels confusing for a young person.
Well, our cultural moment is a moment of extreme polarization.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just the polarization that you may have had in an earlier generation where you had passionate disagreement among Americans as to the best means to pursue agreed upon ends. Today, our division is about ends as well as means. It's not just how do we bring about prosperity?
Right.
Is it by having higher taxes with more government spending? Or
Yeah.
is it with lower taxes and less regulation? We no longer have a debate as we had in, say, 1960 about what the best methods of deterring Soviet aggression were. We agreed that there was Soviet aggression. We
Right.
agreed that we need to stop it. We need to push back against it. And there were
Right.
disagreements between Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives about exactly how to do
That's a
that.
good
But
point.
today we have deep disagreements about fundamental things:
Right.
sanctity of human life,
Right. Right.
marriage and the family,
Hmm.
religious liberty and the rights of conscience.
Hmm.
The parallel here from an earlier period are disagreements in the earlier period about race, where they weren't just disagreements about ends and about means to agreed upon ends, where there were real fundamental value disagreements, a
Hmm.
disagreement about whether all human beings were in truth created equal.
Yeah, it's true.
And we have similar debates today, but they're across a much larger range of issues.
Right. Hmm. Well, I mean, if we compare, because I agree. I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. Things are much more progressive here than they are in most other places around the country. But it does feel like, as a conservative, as a Christian, when I talk to progressives, there's like such a chasm between what I think is true and what they think is true, just about what it means to be a human being.
Well, that's
That
certainly true. And part of that is that Americans used to be united not only in their shared belief in our Republican democratic experiment, in our
yeah,
Constitution, the principles of the Declaration. Americans, whether they were Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, were also united in fundamental values. They believed in
yeah,
the importance of faith in God. They had
right,
different traditions of worshiping God, different theologies, different doctrines, different dogmas,
right.
but we were agreed that we were one nation under God.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
They agreed on the importance of the family and of the institution of marriage, and they agreed about what marriage actually is: the conjugal union of husband and wife.
Right.
And they agreed that people have certain rights to the free exercise of religion, to freedom of speech, these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Well, today we disagree about those things. Progressivism has basically become a secular dogma or doctrine.
Yes.
It wasn't always so. There are still some religious progressives, of course, but progressivism as a movement is essentially a secular movement for all intents and purposes, a
Yes.
secular movement. And while there are secular forces within conservatism, conservatism in general is not a secular movement. There
Right.
are Protestant conservatives, there are Catholic conservatives, there are Jewish conservatives, but they are by
Right.
far the majority. The religious conservatives are by far the majority in the conservative movement.
Hmm.
There are some seculars, but they're secular conservatives, but they're not the majority. So there's a real fundamental difference there. So that's new. That's something in the last 60 years. It's
Sure.
not something that was the case in the 19th century or in the early 20th century. The early 20th century progressives, on the whole, were not secular. They were
Mm-hmm.
religious people. They were religious social gospel
Right.
liberals, basically.
Right. Right. So what do you do about that divide, though? Like, I don't know how to reconcile the deep. I mean, I remember reading Carl Truman's "The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self" and
Great book.
thinking
Great,
it's
great, great scholar, Carl Truman.
absolutely fantastic, and it was written at the perfect time. I mean, it really cleared a lot of things up for me personally. It's one of the best books I've ever read, and he discusses this. I think it was Charles Taylor makes this dichotomy between a mimetic worldview and a poetic worldview. I'm not sure if I'm getting all that correct, but the mimetic worldview essentially just being the idea that the world is made up of natural laws that we have to conform ourselves to, and the poetic worldview is the world is made up of raw material in which you can shape into whatever you desire, essentially. And that seems like, when I read that a couple of years back, I thought to myself, that's like the divide here. You get into the issue of the ideological divide. You get into the issue of like transgenderism and what they think the human person is, not just metaphysically, but physically, compared to what the Christian thinks the human person is as a whole embodied person created by God. And there's these worldviews that obviously you can't reconcile. They oppose each other. And yet, like you're saying, nobody wants to see a violent outcome to what is happening, because of these worldviews. Like, because of the differences in these worldviews, people are starting to get violent. I feel like your book argues, and you've argued a lot, that the best way to change people's minds on these issues is by speaking the truth. Well, seeking the truth, then speaking the truth, like your book title. Like, okay, I agree with you, but how do you convince people of that when things seem so volatile right now? Because Charlie Kirk's doing that. He was doing that, and now he's dead. And again, that doesn't mean that retaliation is good. It's obviously not biblical. We don't repay evil for evil. But when things seem so volatile, when emotions are high, and I've been told my whole life by conservatives, you have to convince them, you have to articulate your positions, you have to engage in debate. And I've tried that in a lot of situations, and there ends up being a blockage at the point where the person they're like, I don't want to engage with you anymore. You're the enemy. And I know this is a big question, but what do you do about that, where the conversation seems to be shut down in certain ways by the left right now?
It takes two to tango.
Sure.
You can't have a one-way conversation. That's a lecture. That's not a conversation.
Right.
And if another person, for whatever reason, ideological, personal, familial, refuses to have a conversation with you, you can't have a conversation. It's just impossible.
Right.
But I think we always need to be open to conversation with anybody who's willing to have a conversation with us, no matter how vast the chasm is, religiously, politically, philosophically, morally, between us. We need to always be the ones who are open to conversation and inviting other people into the conversation where there are no conditions other than the conditions, the natural, obvious condition that we need to do business in the proper currency of intellectual discourse, giving reasons, making arguments, providing evidence. But we mustn't demand anything more than that. We mustn't demand that you do business in our particular language, or that we control the terms of the debate, or that you have to agree to some positions that we share in order to have a conversation with us. We need to be open. Brother Cornel West and I are trying to model this every day, really, in our work together. We're trying to show that you can do this. We profoundly disagree about a whole bunch of really important issues. Right. And yet we place no conditions on our conversation. We can talk about anything. People ask both of us, well, there's some really touchy subjects that you just can't touch, that you have to stay away from, that you can't converse about. The answer to that question is absolutely not. You can ask him and he'll give you the same answer. Absolutely not. Right. We can talk about anything because we trust and respect each other. We want to hear what the other one has to say. We know, each of us knows, he is fallible. He can be wrong. He can be wrong not only on the minor, trivial, superficial things of life. He can be wrong on the big, important, profound issues, the issues of human nature, the human good, human dignity, human rights, human destiny. So if we're going to actually correct any errors that we might have fallen into, we're going to have to allow ourselves to be challenged, not just on our minor beliefs, not just on the stuff that's not all that important to us, but even and perhaps especially on the stuff that is really important to us, our most cherished beliefs, those beliefs around which we integrate ourselves and form our identity. So we're trying to model that for other people. We need more people to join us in that. We need more people to set the example for their children, for their grandchildren, for their students, for anybody who's under their influence, especially young people, of being in civil dialogue and treating each other as civic friends, even when you disagree. Lincoln closed his first inaugural address with the Civil War looming because of his election. Because he was elected, the South was on the verge of seceding, beginning with South Carolina. Wow. In that first inaugural address, knowing that if the South secedes, that means war, knowing if there's war, that means carnage, Lincoln said, I'm loath to close. I'm loath to close this talk. I don't want to stop talking. I'm loath to close. Right. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. And that's got to be the attitude that all of us as Americans have, that we are friends, despite our disagreements. We must not be enemies. And we have to hope and pray and trust that, that we will again be touched by the better angels of our nature.
Yeah.
And if we're touched by the better angels of our nature, that concept that Lincoln closed the first inaugural address with, that means that we will, no matter how angry we will resist the temptation to violence, to hatred, to coercion, and embrace the course of civic friendship and civil dialogue.
Yes. No, I agree. I mean, you start your book talking about this a little bit about human dignity, which is what underlies that friendship, the idea that other people are created in the image of God and that they have dignity, and that we at the very least owe them the respect of a human person who has dignity, who is made in the image of God. And so I never heard of human dignity growing up, and other than from my parents who were Christians, but in the school system, I never heard of the idea of dignity, human dignity, why each person has dignity. And even after I gave my life to Christ and became a Christian later on, I still struggled with the idea of human dignity, because I felt like growing up, I was taught differently about human nature. Human nature, kind of a Darwinian and maybe Rousseauian, or even nihilistic view of human nature. There's really no meaning to life, and it was hard to reconcile that with the Christian worldview, that there is meaning to life, and that being a human being is like a good thing, and there's purpose, and God has plans for people, and that was all totally different from what the school taught me. What exactly is, just to begin, what exactly is dignity? Like, where do we come up with this idea of human dignity? Obviously in the theological realm, but also in the political realm. How does that translate over into how we engage with the political realm and have civil discourse?
Dignity is the concept of intrinsic worth. By intrinsic worth, I mean the worth that something or someone has, not in virtue of being a means to some other end, but in virtue of being an end in itself, or an end in himself or herself. Something that doesn't exist for the benefit of other people or other things, but something that is intrinsically valuable. That's the basic idea. The basic biblical proposition embraced by Christians and Jews is that human beings are bearers of profound, inherent, and equal dignity. Doesn't matter how strong or how weak, how rich or how poor, how brilliant or how unintelligent, how favored or unfavored, how healthy or how sick, how high status or how low status. Right. Every member of the human family is the bearer of profound, inherent, and equal worth, equal dignity, because it's intrinsic and not extrinsic. We have our value as an end in itself, not as a means to an end. And there's a Christian or Judeo-Christian story about how it is that we human beings, every single one of us, even the most despised, even the most dilapidated, even the most degraded, are bearers of profound, inherent, and equal dignity. And that story goes this way. That God, the Lord of the universe, who made all that is, who made the birds of the air and the fish of the sea, and hung the moon and the sun, and created the oceans, also created a creature called man. And that creature, unlike all of the rest of God's creation, that creature, man, the human being, he made in his very image and likeness. That is, each and every member of the human family is made in the very image and likeness of the divine creator and ruler of all that is. It's that thought that produced the famous second sentence of the Declaration of Independence, which provides the foundational principle of our country. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the story. I believe it. And the question for each American today in our cultural moment, on this sad day when we've had such a tragic event as the murder of Charlie Kirk, the question for every single American is, do we still hold these truths? Do we still believe it?
Yeah.
Are all men created equal, endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights? Do we believe that each and every member of the human family is made in the very image and likeness of God? And there will be a divide between those who believe it and those who don't believe it. But for those of us who believe it, our nation's and our culture's future hangs in the balance of our willingness to stand up for it.
Mm-hmm. It's Jefferson. It's interesting. He didn't write that we have rights to property. I think I don't know the history as well as you do. Maybe it was John Locke or who he was pulling from for the rights, the inalienable rights. But he says the pursuit of happiness. And from my understanding, and I'd like to hear your perspective on this, happiness meant something a little bit more back then than it does today. Nowadays we think of happiness.
Absolutely. I can explain that to you.
Yeah. Why did he say the pursuit of happiness?
Yeah, it's very misleading given the way the meaning of the word happiness has evolved. Right. So when you hear that word today, it connotes a psychological state, a pleasant psychological state. You're going around with a smile on your face. Now that smile, might be the result of some good fortune. It might be the result of something that you did that was very satisfying. It might be produced by a pill. Or something like that. Right. That is not what our 18th century forebears in the 18th century meant by happiness. Their concept of happiness was morally inflected. It would be better captured today by terms like flourishing, well-being, fulfillment, beatitude, blessedness. Yeah. So it's not pursuing whatever gives you pleasant psychological feelings. Sure. That might be something really bad.
Yeah, right.
You just might happen to be, kind of sick, and you take happiness or pleasure in torturing cats. That's not what our founding fathers had in mind.
Right.
What they had in mind was morally inflected.
Yes.
Our flourishing, our pursuit of our flourishing, by exercising the great capacities that God has given us for knowledge, for friendship, for the appreciation of beauty, and so forth and so on. That's what it meant. So you're right to suspect that the meaning of the term has shifted, causing it to be a misleading term to somebody who doesn't know what it meant to our 18th century forebears.
It's so helpful understanding that, because even when I read older theologians, I like Jonathan Edwards, I'm a Protestant. There's this talk of happiness among older theologians, John Owen, some of these guys. I'm thinking to myself, what are you talking about being happy? Like happiness is like a fleeting emotion. What about joy and purpose and fulfillment? And that's exactly what they were talking about.
Yeah,
and
that's it.
Another fascinating thing about that word, though, is how you read that sentence in Jefferson and what he wrote really determines, and how you understand that word happiness. It feels like it determines how you understand the Constitution and what the purpose of America is. I think of the two ways that I think I read this in the Stanford Philosophical Encyclopedia. It says there's negative liberty and there's positive liberty.
That's taken from the great essayist Isaiah Berlin, Positive and Negative Liberty.
And so positive liberty is essentially, the right to pursue virtue. It's to pursue something that is good, the freedom to pursue what is good and true and right and beautiful and that sort of thing. And negative liberty is the freedom to pursue sort of whatever.
Just the absence of coercion.
Exactly.
To do whatever you want to do.
Exactly.
Now, obviously, our founding fathers did not believe in liberty in the sense of just do whatever you want to do.
Right.
They would call that not liberty, but license.
Yes.
And what license is the abuse of liberty. It's not authentic liberty. It's not honorable liberty. So we move that off the table once we understand what they meant by liberty, just as we can move certain things off the table when we understand what they meant by happiness. So yes, we should be partisans and defenders and supporters of liberty, but not license.
Right. Well, then how did that flip, though? Because a lot of people in the United States today would say that liberalism, rooted in libertas, is this negative liberty the freedom from restraint. You should be able to do whatever you want, just don't hurt anybody, sort of thing. And from what I understand, just what we were just talking about, that is not what the founding fathers meant, and that's also not like what the Bible means when it talks about freedom and liberty.
Freedom of the believer, no.
Right. So when did that change? Why did people start redefining it? I don't know if you can, this date is when everything changed, but what happened?
Well, once you start tracing things back, you eventually, and usually sooner rather than later, end up back at the Garden of Eden, where the fall of man and people making mistakes and misreading things and getting things wrong and so forth.
Right.
But there are certain strains of Enlightenment thought that emphasize the importance of individual autonomy and I think end up distorting or being distorted to generate a kind of libertarianism that fails to attend to the distinction between liberty and license. Yes. And then the other crucial thing is basically the rise in the period just before and just after the Second World War, and maybe beginning in the 1920s, getting real steam in the 1940s and 50s. That phenomenon we know as the sexual revolution. That's really a key part of the picture. When you look at expressive, what the great late sociologist Robert Vela called expressive individualism, Carl Trueman talks about it in his book.
Yes.
When you look at the rise of expressive individualism, it's really tied to the desire to be free of traditional constraints on sexuality.
Yes.
And then that becomes a fulcrum for other things like, recreational drugs and gambling and all that stuff. But it's really the sexual revolution that drives that ultra libertarian spirit. Now, as a political philosophy, I have a lot of respect for libertarianism as a serious political philosophy. But this kind of cheap faux libertarianism that really doesn't understand the distinction between liberty and license, I think is a dangerous thing. And it's just it's a convenient excuse for people throwing over traditional norms of sexual morality on which, as it turns out, societies depend for their health and integrity.
Right. This is fascinating to me because, and it obviously it always goes back to the garden, but you can trace it in the United States back. And I think that Truman did this a little bit to Rousseau, and Rousseau's understanding of human nature and human beings being sort of these primarily sexual creatures who are the end purpose in life is sexual
satisfaction.
Satisfaction, yeah. Why? And I know the answer to this, but I think it's good to just say it and talk about it. Like, why is sex at the core of that idea? Like the negative liberty ideology devolves into sexual perversion. It also devolves into other perversions, but it feels like it quickly and first devolved into sexual perversion. And that's sort of the core of it, the center of it. And when you talk to people about maybe we should say marriage is for a man and a woman, not for a man and a man, they get angry. They get like furious. Wait a second. You're putting restraints on my sexuality, which means that you're denying who I am as a human person. And they start to equate their sexual desires with their actual ontological nature. Yeah. And that's always very confusing. Why is that at the core of this ideology? Why is sex at the core of it?
Yeah. Well, our sexuality is a beautiful thing.
Right.
Religious people believe that it's a gift from God. It's a powerful bond between husband and wife. It's a power that gives us the great, inestimable gift of children. New human beings come into the world in virtue of the sexual union of a man and a woman. Ideally, in the circumstance of the marital bond, in which we give our offspring the very best conditions for a good life. But at the same time, our sexuality is a powerful appetite, a powerful drive, and it's easily deflected. And that's why norms governing sexuality in a culture have to be so stringent. And sometimes people overdo it and they fall into a kind of prudery. or they fall into the, I think, mistaken belief that sexuality's only really legitimate purpose is the generation of children. So you can make mistakes in either direction.
Right.
But it is a powerful drive, and sexual desire can motivate people to do things that they shouldn't be doing. And then they look for a justification for it. They look for an excuse. They look for a rationalization, some way of reconciling it to the moral truth. And so they begin to think, or begin to say, whether they think it or not, these norms regarding sexual morality, that sex belongs only in marriage and marriage is the union of husband and wife. Right. These are outmoded, prudish, Victorian principles. And they have a really bad psychological effect. They lead us to be twisted people.
Yes.
We should celebrate our sexuality. We should be freer. We'll find fulfillment. But of course, anybody who's actually gone down that road doesn't find fulfillment.
Right.
They don't find love. They don't find happiness. They find that sexuality has been turned into a method of self-destruction. It hurts them. Their sexual irresponsibility, their promiscuity doesn't lead to happiness and fulfillment, but to the opposite. So it's a complex story.
Right. I mean, there's a great quote. It's about sin by John Owen. He says, "Be killing sin, or sin will be killing you." There's this idea that sexual sin, like, you can contain it. Whatever happens in your bedroom, that's not going to make its way out into society. It's not going to affect your worldview or anything like that. So, do what you want at home, but then when you go out into the world, you can almost have like split like two different lives. And
it's a very bad idea. It's a very bad idea.
It's a terrible idea. And I think for the Christian, right, like John Owen's saying, kill sin or sin will be killing you. You're going to be a slave to something, it seems like, whether that's your sin or your desires or your passions, or whether that's to Christ and the truth. And I think...
Well, I wouldn't put it quite that way. I mean, I think your options are either to be the slave of your passions, or to be their master.
That is true.
Down one road is slavery. Down the other road is mastery. Yes. And what we should all aspire to do and work to do and be encouraged to do and be formed by our parents and teachers and pastors and coaches and those with influence over us when we're young to do is to be masters of ourselves, masters of our desires, to act on our judgments of what is good and to reshape and reform our desires to bring them into line with our judgments as to what is good. The great Greek philosophers, I have in mind especially here Plato, raised the question, what is the proper ordering of the soul? The soul has parts. What is the proper ordering of the soul? Well, Plato says that the proper ordering is to make sure that the rational part is in control of the appetitive part. That reason is in control of desire. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's a core aspect of it. What is a disordered soul? It's where things are backwards, where desire is in charge, in control, and it is overpowered reason. And what happens when that's the case? Desire harnesses reason as a mechanism for producing rationalizations, justifications, false justifications, rationalizations for immoral conduct. To try to persuade ourselves that what we're doing, acting on our desires, is actually good. So it's really important to make sure our soul is not disordered, passion controlling reason, but ordered, reason controlling passion.
That's so good. That's like that's really helpful for me to hear right now, the way that you describe that, because it seems like that's really what's happening. And I don't even want to just put it on the left, say that the left is the ones who are controlled by their desires. I think it's happening on the right and the left. And a lot of people...
I mean, it's the human condition, Andy.
Right.
All of us face the challenge of getting our souls straight. And you don't have to be a Christian to understand that. You understand that you've got reason and you've got desire. So all of us face the challenge of making sure that our desire doesn't overwhelm our reason, that our reason is in charge and masters our desire so that we can be, and we are, masters of ourselves. That's a challenge whether you're liberal, conservative, black, white, Republican, Democrat, male, female, believer, unbeliever. That's the challenge of living a human life. And there's no one who's immune from it. And there's no one who can do the work of self-mastery for you.
Right.
Your parents can't do it for you. Your brothers and sisters can't do it for you. Your pastor can't do it for you. Your coach can't do it for you. They can give us guidance, and they should. They can give us support, and they should. They can reprimand us when we go wrong, and they should. But they can't do it for us. Only we ourselves can make the choices that form us as virtuous or overwhelmed by vice. Only we can make the choices that make our reason the master of our desires.
Mm-hmm. I think the next question that somebody would think of, and that I'm thinking of immediately, is, what do you do with an entire generation that's been taught the opposite, that have lived the opposite, maybe multiple generations at this point?
That freedom is acting on your desires. That true fulfillment is acting on your desires.
Like what?
You critique it mercilessly. You absolutely critique it mercilessly. You ask questions. How did Socrates handle things on the streets of Athens? He didn't go and preach sermons, although I'm all for preaching sermons. I mean, that's good. But I'm even more for this, because I am a Socratic. I'm a follower of Socrates.
Sure.
Ask questions. Ask questions. Can this view that our fulfillment really is to be found in acting on our desires, whatever our desires are, seeking the satisfaction of our desires? Let's ask questions about that. Let's look at lives of people who practice that and compare them with lives of people who practice self-control. And really ask ourselves, what produces good and what produces evil? What produces true happiness, joy, fulfillment, and what produces just emptiness? Living a life of debauchery leads to nothing but emptiness. Living a life of virtue, concern for others, self-restraint, self-discipline, a life devoted to the pursuit of the good, pursuit of the true, pursuit of the beautiful, that's what yields fulfillment, joy.
Right. Well, I do. Okay. So I'm not going to, a slight, I guess, pushback would be, so I totally agree. We got to ask questions. And I think that really that can get the conversation going. And if you ask the right questions and if you ask the good questions, people will kind of get themselves, they'll realize, oh, wait, maybe I don't actually understand. On the other hand, Socrates had that method, but Jesus had a different method, it seems to me, and maybe I'm seeing this wrong. There's a spiritual element to proclaiming the truth as just a proclamation. I think of I always get this mixed up. I think it's Ezekiel in the Valley of Dry Bones in the Old Testament, where you've got all these dead bones. God's like, hey, prophesy over these bones. Say these words that I'm giving you, and the bones will come to life. And, Ezekiel says, bones don't come to life. What are you talking about? And so he prophesies those words over the bones that God has told him to say, and the bones come to life. And the Spirit of God breathes air into those bones, and they become alive. Now, my understanding of that is, one, I think it actually happened, but two, that's the type of evangelism. I think that was a foreshadowing of what evangelism is. It's a proclamation of the truth that God has given us to say, and then for the Spirit of God to do the job of breathing life into those once dead bones that are now alive. So this is the difficulty for me as I think through, how do I affect people the best in my own life that I come around, that I disagree with, that are in my own life? How do I best convince them of the truth? And there's these two methods, and I'm not saying they're contradictory to each other, because I think that they can both be used with each other. But one is to ask questions and use that as a primary driving force. And then what Jesus did is like just proclaim the truth and allow for the Spirit to work in that. I guess how do you reconcile those two? Because you're a Christian.
Well, they're not contradictory.
Yeah, totally.
I'm all for proclamation, the proclamation of the gospel. We're called on by Jesus himself to proclaim the good news, especially to the poor. And by this, he doesn't mean simply the financially poor. We're to proclaim the good news to the poor and to the captive. And here he doesn't just mean, people who are actually in prison. Those words all have broader meanings. So I'm all for proclamation. Now, there are two ways to proclaim, and both are important, and we have to use both. One is with words. Other is by the example of how we lead our lives. And it's the second that is actually even more important than the first. They're both important. They're both indispensable. You have to do both.
Mm-hmm.
But the second one, the proclamation by the way we lead our lives, is the even more impressive and therefore more important one. I believe it was St. Francis of Assisi. If it wasn't him, it was some other great figure in the history of Christianity. But I believe it was St. Francis who said, preach the gospel always. If necessary, use words.
Sure.
Which, of course, suggests that, sometimes, maybe often, it's not necessary or even desirable to use words so much as it is to show people the Christian message, give people, deliver people, proclaim the Christian message by the way we lead our lives. But I also think that dialogue, which involves questioning, discussion, challenging, criticizing, being criticized, going back and forth is important. And this was not by any means alien to Jesus himself.
Right.
He's confronted with a moral dilemma. It was a real moral dilemma for the Jewish people of his time. Is it lawful, by which at the end of the day, given the relationship of Jewish law to morality, is it moral? Is it right? Is it just? Is it morally good to pay taxes to Caesar? That's a really tough question.
It's a good question.
Century Palestine for Jewish people.
Right.
What does Jesus do? He says, give me a coin.
Right.
They give him a coin. He asks a question. Whose image is on the coin?
Right.
Caesar. Mm-hmm. And then he said, there you have your answer. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, but unto God what is God's.
Right.
So Jesus, in the great tradition of the rabbis, Jesus is a rabbi, among other things, proceeds in part by asking questions.
Right. I like I mean, I totally agree that you can do, obviously both of them are done at the same time. Jesus is masterful at it, but I also think, and we've got like 10 minutes left, but as we started this conversation talking about Charlie Kirk, I do think that he actually was very good at asking questions. And when it was time, saying, here, proclaiming the truth. He was a master at it. He really was. He was fantastic at that. And that was why he was so convincing, I think, to so many young people, because when somebody came to him with a whole set of presuppositions that he probably knew in his head are like all wrong, he didn't just say, you're stupid, you're wrong, I don't want to talk to you, which I think a lot of people do. And I think that that's a terrible way of dealing with people that you disagree with. He asked questions, and he would, and it was masterful. I don't know how many videos of his that you watched, but I felt like he was really good at this. I don't know if have you watched his videos?
I didn't watch a lot of them, but I'm sure I've seen 4 or 5 of them. And, he engages people who disagree with him in a constructive way. He accepts their challenge. He asks them questions. He challenges them, but he also accepts their challenges. And basically saying, give me your best argument. Give me your reasons, and I'm going to tell you if I disagree, why I disagree with your reasons. I mean, that's what I mean by civil discourse.
Mm-hmm. It's good. It's good. And I think you treated people with dignity. And so, no, I totally agree with you. And I think your book, Seeking Truth and Speaking Truth, actually is just super helpful for me, as I feel like 2025, I think a lot of people thought, okay, if Trump becomes president, this is the problem with human beings, if we get our guy in there, things are just going to get normal again and we'll get whatever we want back. And that's obviously not what's happening. Things are not just getting normal. And bad things are still happening because we live in a fallen world. But as I've looked for clarity in the current moment that we live in, the current cultural moment, it's very hard to find clarity because it feels like people are retreating to different tribalistic.
Tribalism is a big problem, Andy. It's a huge problem, and it's no good. It's not a good thing. Now, human beings are naturally social. We're going to form tribes.
Yes.
And it's not wrong to be a member of a tribe, a political party, religious, obviously, a religious faith, families, obviously. But we must not become tribalistic, where our views are entirely dictated by the tribe that we're in. We go along with whatever the tribe thinks. And we treat people in other tribes not as fellow citizens and friends, but as enemies. Not people to be persuaded or argued with and learned from, but as enemies to be destroyed. I'm going to quote Lincoln again.
Good.
We must not be enemies. We must be friends. Even when we have profound disagreements, we must be friends.
Yes. Can you just tell me, to finish this off, as you look into the future, I mean, you've lived through more than I've lived through. What do you see? What, I guess, do you have any predictions for where this cultural moment goes, and maybe what you see prediction wise, but then also like what do you hope for? How do you stay hopeful? I mean, especially today, today just feels very heavy because such a massive figure, such a massive conservative figure and person it died. And he was killed, he was murdered. And it's heavy, but how do you maintain hope in the midst of these very heavy and very dark situations that seem to be continuing to happen?
It's hard today. I'm by nature an optimistic person, but optimism is not hope. Hope is much more important than optimism. Optimism is just about your beliefs about what's going to happen. And you think good things are going to happen. That's being an optimist.
Absolutely.
Hope is a virtue. It's one of the three great theological virtues: faith, hope, and love. It's integral to the theological virtues. It's related to faith and to love in a very central way. And really, in order to have love and to have faith, you need hope, just as you need faith for hope and love, and you need love for hope and faith. And hope as a virtue is an active thing. It's not just an opinion about what's likely to happen. Hope is a resolution to act to make good things happen.
That's true.
And to do our best to try to stop bad things from happening. Something very bad happened today, and we're stunned by it and stung by it, and we are demoralized. I'm feeling very demoralized right now, especially given my work with Cornel West. And Cornel and I have been out there just doing our best to advocate for civil discourse. And not only do we not get civil discourse today, we get an actual murder of somebody. Again, we don't know the facts yet, but it could very well be that he was murdered by somebody who disagreed with him because that person didn't like Charlie's opinions.
Right.
So it's hard not to be demoralized. So just at the moment, I'm having trouble being the hopeful person I want to be, and I usually am. But I'm going to overcome this because I'm going to cling to the virtue of hope.
Right.
I'm determined to. I'm going to use everything in my willpower to get myself back on the track of hope. We're called to do that by Jesus himself. As I say, hope is a theological virtue. Anybody who proclaims himself to be a biblical believer, if you're Jewish or you're Christian, and I'm sure in the other traditions there's something very similar, is required to practice the virtue of hope. It's not just a fact about yourself. You either have hope or you don't hope. It's not like that. It's an obligation. It's a duty. It's something that you're required to do. And so I resolve to live up to that duty, as difficult as it is just at the moment, to have that hope in my heart.
Totally. I mean, it makes me think, it makes me think about Genesis 50, the story of Joseph, sold into slavery, obviously, and that's a horrible situation. And through his, a life of hope and faith and belief in God, at the end of, it's one of the best verses in the Bible, one of the best quotes in the Bible. What you meant for evil, my God meant for good, as he speaks to his
Joseph
brothers.
tells his brothers. His brothers had sold him into slavery. Right. And still he welcomes them into Egypt, where he's become a great man, second only to the Pharaoh.
Right.
And then he finally reveals himself. He plays with them for a while. He teases them for a while. Finally reveals himself. I am Joseph, your brother. And then he says that beautiful line that you just quoted. Yeah, you meant selling me into slavery for evil. You were mad at me. You were envious of me because of my father's favor of me. But what you meant for evil, God has turned to good. So we have to trust God to do it again. Yes, absolutely. 100%. What man meant for evil, God will work for good. Absolutely. For sure. Well, Robert, George, thanks. This is your third time coming on my podcast. Every time I enjoy our conversations. I think I learn a lot. And your book it's my very great pleasure, Andy. Yes. Thank you. Your book is great. Seeking Truth and Speaking Truth. People should go get it. I'll put a link to that in the description. Thank you. Especially today, I really hope that people will share it not just read it, please do read it, but please share it with your children and with your, I mean, if you're high school age or college age children or grandchildren, this is a message that we've got to get to our young people. Truth really does matter. We've got to be on the side of truth. We have to pursue truth relentlessly. We have to be determined truth seekers and courageous truth speakers. And that's the objective of the book.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Andy.